Hi, this is Terry from Bonsai Tree once again, and today I'm going to be working a little bit on this elm. It is now late spring, and so the spring growth has now had a good chance to harden off, bring back energy back into the tree again, and all these leaves acting as little solar panels. And so the tree is now at a very high position, or at a point of loaded with energy, and so now we can go back in and do some work. And so the scope of the work that I want to do today is really just to assess the tree and see where you can obviously see some of the growth that has grown quite aggressively from the profile of the tree, but then there are some shoots that are also fairly weak. So we need to know how to handle the two different types of shoots that we've got, and then also just assess the tree slightly in terms of the weaker areas of the tree, as in a branch that perhaps needs to be extended a little bit further, or is perhaps just a little bit weaker because it's being shaded out. And then also, this is a tree that I featured in a video that I rather embarrassingly did a number of years ago. What I knew then in terms of videography is not, would like to think that I'm kind of offering now. So but I just want to show, a couple of people have asked me, but in that video I particularly handled scars. There was quite a big scar in this tree that needed to be filled, and in that video, which I'll link to now, that you can watch it if you're curious, I just want to follow up because a few people have asked me what does the scar look like now. So I'll show that during this video. The history of this tree was it was actually originally grown from a cutting, and I field grew it, in fact, in my backyard in some raised beds that I made for the purpose. And over a number of years, it's developed into quite a pleasing, I'm very pleased with the result. Of course, with the deciduous trees, most deciduous trees look best when they don't have any leaves on. This tree is no exception. It does have a very nice ramification, a lot of good fine network of branches. You can see a long shoot like this has been allowed to extend quite far from the profile of the tree, and that is something that we need to address before we lose. If we allow it to get too long, almost like a sacrifice branch, it's going to thicken up too much there and it's going to become quite coarse. So we want to prevent that, so we'll need to prune this back. However, there are other areas of the tree where the branchlets, the spring growth is very weak, so we're going to leave those alone. So here you can see the callus, the scarring, that is largely healed over the area that was quite a big scar. In fact, it was as a result of the field growing, and there obviously was a big branch or trunk. It was almost like a second trunk really at this point of the tree. And when I removed that, it started to callus over on the edges, but some of the wood on the interior started to rot. So the previous video that I did showed how I hollowed this out and filled it up with cement. But now you can see that a lot of the this is all filled up or covered over by callus. It's only this tiny little speck in here that is still cement, but you can barely see that, and that'll cover over very shortly. Now, of course, you see this this callus formation over here that's formed a bit of a lump. It was always my intention to reduce it, but I didn't want to do that at the time because it would have obviously interfered with the sap flow and healing of this area. But now that this has healed over, it would now be a good idea to go back and reduce this lump. And actually, at this time of the year, it's a good idea to do this as well, because the formation of the callus tissue will be a lot slower now because the sap flow is going to be reduced. So not as aggressively as it is, or as aggressive as it is in spring. So that's maybe something that I will also do now to reduce this. Before I start working on a tree, I always like to make sure that my tools are as sharp as possible and also clean. So I'm going to be using most of the work will be done, certainly on the trimming anyway, will be done with a trimming scissors. And so I'm just going to use some of the some diamond sharpening files to give it a good sharp honed edge. And then also, well, before that I'll use a cremate block just to remove the residue of the sap from the last time I used the scissors. So my cremate block has been used quite a bit, so it's actually got some oil in it. But if it's a new block that you're using, or if you haven't used yours too often, then you can use jojoba oil, to just a couple of drops of jojoba oil, and that will clean off the residue, as you can see from the tool. And in fact, it's actually, I was told by a Japanese tool manufacturer that it's very often the sap or residue buildup that is the cause of a lot of problems with the tools. If the residue builds up to quite a significant level, then it causes the cutting edges to splay apart, and then you tend to overexert on the tool because it's not cutting properly. And so yeah, it just leads to a number of issues. So it's a good idea to keep your tools as clean as possible before you start working with them. Okay, and then I'm going to use the ultra fine, which is the green file, you don't have to file too much. The tool is already quite sharp. This is just to hone the edge. So maybe 10 or so swipes or files, motions, and that should be sufficient. And you can just test it with your finger and should be nice and sharp. In case you're wondering, this is the Canishin blue steel trimming scissors, which I absolutely love. It's the 35D. It is available around the world, any Canishin suppliers, or you can just order it directly from their website, in fact. I really like them. It feels great in the hand. It's a very good quality steel, so it holds its edge for a long time. And what I also like is that it has a tightening screw or nut. So when the two halves get too loose, then you can just tighten it. Unlike most other scissors, they use a rivet, so you have to hit the rivet, and you always have to be quite careful with that, because if you hit it too much, then the tool will not open. So I'm just going to wipe that off with a cloth, and then I'll be able to use it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's very tempting and very easy to just go through this tree and prune everything back to, everybody knows, leave 2 leaves, trim back to 2 leaves, and everybody knows that technique. But it's quite dangerous to sort of just blanket apply it to your deciduous trees. If you look at a branch like this, for instance, it's growing from the interior of the tree, and in fact it would actually be a nice branch to utilize in the structure of the tree. So this is something that will need to be allowed to grow longer as an escape branch, so that the base of that branch can thicken up a little bit. But then other branches which are already at the peripheral of the tree, those can be pruned back, but even there you want to be careful not to prune back to two buds. You would rather want to prune back to 4, and then you can then do another pruning in autumn. You need to be careful not to reduce the vigor of the tree too much, and if you're pruning it repeatedly as aggressively as down to 2 leaves all the time, you're going to really stunt the growth of the tree. So as I mentioned, branches like this, you can prune them back. They're already at the peripheral or the silhouette of the tree. But you want to try and prune back to a leaf that is facing in the direction that you want the next branchlet to develop in. You're going to find that a dormant bud will develop at the base of this leaf and at the base of this leaf, perhaps at the others as well, but more than likely two or more. So you want to prune something like that, and now you'll have growth coming in this direction and in that direction. And then we can prune here as well. So I'm going to prune back to 4 leaves, and so I'm going to prune that one a little bit shorter and just go through the tree and pruning back. Sometimes you'll find that the leaf is not perhaps going to be in the ideal, the leaf where you want the bud to develop from is not going to be in the ideal position. So you might just need to prune back a leaf at that point. So this branch here, this is one of those that I would like to leave, allow it to get a little bit stronger, and then in autumn something like this can be wired, so give it a little bit of shape on the interior. But this branch can contribute to the overall structure of the tree. So this one will not be pruned. This one is growing a little bit, it's also growing quite strongly, but again, it's the branch just behind this branch. So I'd prefer to keep this one, and this one also can be wired into position. The moment you trim the tip of a branch, the elongation of that branch is not going to continue. So the auxins are going to be redistributed, and you're going to find that budding, you'll get back budding on the branch. So when you're trying to thicken up a branch, you need to allow it to extend without trimming off the tips. Branches that are growing out, or branchlets that are growing out of the bottom of branches, should be removed. You can allow branches that are growing out of the top of the pads to develop, because then you can wire those down. But it's advisable to remove the ones growing to the bottom. So obviously this is quite a refined tree. This is not a tree that's still in development. So you need to adapt your techniques appropriately. But still at this point in time, when you're pruning these little branchlets, you need to keep the overall silhouette, the overall outline of the tree in mind. So when I say that, what I mean is that you need to look at the tree, this shape, if you were to draw an imaginary line around it, this would be, that is the outline or the silhouette that I'm talking about. And you need to prune everything back to within that line. So what you don't want to do, and it's very easy to do it in fact, is that your apex or a branch starts to extend beyond that profile, and then it goes beyond the branches that are lower down than it, and it starts to shade those out, and they of course will then become progressively weaker as well. So to make sure that you turn your tree around and take a look at that profile, so that you can make sure that if you need to allow some growth to develop further forward or to the side, or wherever it is that you need to add a little bit of volume, and then restrain the back until it gets back into that profile, and then you can continue just to trim it and keep it back in shape. Now, if you wired your tree in autumn, and I do tend to wire my deciduous trees at that point in time as well, then you're going to want to watch out for wire bite, because obviously in spring you have a lot of explosive growth, and you can have quite a lot of or quite rapid thickening of the branches, and especially at this stage of a tree's development, in refinement, you don't want to have wire bite. And so you need to make sure that you check on all the wire and remove the wire that's starting to bite in. And the next thing I want to do is to reduce this knob over here. I'm just using a knob cutter to reduce the swelling, and then I'm going to clean it up with a grafting knife. Using a grafting knife, it just gives you, because of the super sharp edge, it gives you a nice clean cut to the live vein or the live tissue. And now we're going to use the putty, the deciduous putty, to seal this. So that's the one with the white lid. The difference between the one with the white lid and the greenish, yellowish lid is that the one, the green yellow lid is for conifers, and it has an added hormone. But this one for the deciduous doesn't need it. Deciduous trees don't need that additional stimulation, so to speak, for callus formation. So you just want to cover up all the exposed tissue with the putty, and then the callus can form below the putty, and then the putty will just fall off when it's ready, basically. So this is something, because it's a fairly large scar, may need to activate the live edge of the callus again with a blade a couple of times to get it to heal over entirely. So that concludes the work on this tree for this sitting. And if I just had to recap, so obviously the techniques that I've shown you now are for more developed trees that are in refinement. If you were still developing your structural branches, you would be wanting to develop these shoots or allowing them to develop as sacrifices, so that they build the girth on the at the base of those sacrifices, and then you would cut those back and you develop your branch structure from that. Most of that has taken place already on this particular tree, and so at this stage it's really just increasing the degree of ramification. And so at this point in time, I just late spring, as I mentioned, leaves hardened off, and so we're just pruning back to the profile. We're allowing certain branches to develop without trimming them back. If the moment we trim them, you're going to get, there's going to be no more elongation, and you're going to get a lot of back budding on those branches. So for these that I'm wanting to use to wire later in the season, in autumn, I'm allowing them to develop a little bit longer so that they will become a little bit thicker. But the rest of it is all being pruned to a profile. And the other thing that I did is I removed all the wire that I'd applied in autumn. Sorry, I keep on saying August. In autumn. And this was because it was starting to bite in. And it's also very easy to miss wire, because now the tree is fully leafed over. So it's easy to miss the wire, and then you get wire bite. And at this point in this tree's development, wire bite is going to be a problem. When it's younger, it's not too much of an issue, because it will grow out in time. But at this point in time, you want to try and avoid wire bite as much as possible. And so then of course I reduced the swelling of that old wound. I allowed the main wound, so to speak, to heal over, and now that sap flow is established, I can start improving the surrounding area, which I did and I demonstrated to you. The original wound, the hole, was actually quite substantial. The wood had started to rot out, needed to be cleaned out, and I've backfilled that with cement cement, and that made a very nice sound surface on which the callus could form, and that healed over very nicely. I'm very happy with that, and that then allowed me to move on to the next step of dealing with that area. It's not terribly exciting work, I must admit. It's really just a persistent or consistent working, or consistently working at the tree and fertilizing it. It's obviously being fertilized already since the beginning of spring, and I will continue to fertilize it quite strongly. I want the tree to be healthy. That helps me to so I definitely wouldn't be starving the tree in order to hold back or stunt the growth in any way. It's better to have a healthy tree, and then of course as branches become coarse, you're going to replace those branches, and this is like ongoing work or ongoing maintenance task, which is to as the branches become too coarse, you're going to replace it with new branches. So you retain the overall size of the tree, and you need to retain the delicacy, or that's not the right word, the feminine or the delicate branches near the profile of the tree, as it reaches the extremities. That needs to be as delicate as possible. So you're constantly having to replace branches to promote that as they become coarse, because of course the tree is growing. It is kept in morning sun, some afternoon sun. Try and shield it a little bit from the late afternoon sun, which is the hottest part of the day, middle to the latter part of the day. Also drying winds, and it was not repotted this spring, and that will also help to serve to slow down the growth. It is growing in, I believe, 100% akadama, and the surface root is a complete mat. So it's really, I'm sure that the container is full of roots, but I decided, based on the health of the tree, that there was no, and the fact that the water was draining very well through the substrate, that there was no need to repot. But I probably will look at repotting it in the following spring. So that would be in 2022. But anyway, so I hope that you've enjoyed this short lesson, and if you have any questions, please do comment below, and please do subscribe and follow, and then as I do more of these videos. And what I really enjoyed about this one was that it's obviously a follow-up on a video that I've done previously. So it's nice to continue the life of a tree through this medium, and I hope that you're enjoying following it as well. Thanks so much for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.